Good afternoon and welcome to CS Week Women in Utilities webinar series sponsored by AAC Utility Partners. I'm Lisa Collins with CS Week and I'll be your moderator today. Mark your calendars for CS Week and Conference 40, April 25th to 29th, 2016 at the Phoenix Convention Center in Phoenix, Arizona. Please watch your email and our social media channels for registration information as follows. Attendees are encouraged to upload questions to the Q&A panel as they arise. However, all questions will be held until after the presentation for the Q&A segment. Please ensure that you address your questions to all panelists. This program will be recorded and available for playback along with our other archived presentations found under the Educational Venues Webinars tab on our website. Today's webinar topic is Make It in What is Still a Male-Dominated Industry, presented by Linda Lee Stanley, SVP and Market Executive of Commercial Banking in North and South Carolina for Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. In Linda's current role as Market Executive for both North Carolina and South Carolina commercial banking teams, she leads a team of professionals dedicated to delivering the bank's full product suite, including investment banking, credit, treasury solutions, investment management, and personal banking to their clients. In her prior role as Senior Client Manager on the Southeast Middle Market, Georgia, Alabama team within the Southeast Region Commercial Banking Group, she led a team of commercial bankers to deliver integrated financial solutions to these power, utility, and energy companies. Linda has 28 years in the banking industry, beginning her career at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Prior to joining Bank of America, she worked for Fifi Bank, Credit Bank, and SunTrust. She holds a Series 7, 24, and 63 securities license. The majority of her banking career has centered on the specialized industries of energy, power, and utilities. Linda is an active participant in the bank's Global Diversity and Inclusion Program for the iGen Affinity Group, Women's Leadership Lead Affinity Group, and also serves as a mentor in the Southeast Region program, as well as the Collaborative Mentoring Program. Currently serving as team captain on the bank's Charlotte Chamber of Commerce campaign. Linda is a native of South Carolina and graduated from the University of South Carolina with dual Bachelor of Science degrees in Finance and Marketing, as well as a minor in International Studies. She attended the Master's of Business Administration program at Georgia State University. As evident on the slide before you, Linda is extremely involved in civic and community endeavors. To highlight a few, she is a board member for the Charlotte Regional Partnership, the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, and on the Board of Advisors for the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce. Of note, she is a founding member of the Georgia State University Women's Mentoring Program and actively involved as a volunteer in several associations and societies, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, American Red Cross, Epilepsy Foundation, just to name a few. She resides in Charlotte with her husband, Brian, and her hobbies include entertaining, traveling, hiking, kayaking, reading, and genealogy. And Linda, I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Lisa, for that kind introduction. I appreciate it so much. And I'd also like to thank AAC Utility Partners for inviting me and for hosting this event. I hope many of you were here in Charlotte, where I am, earlier this year for the conference. It was a great opportunity to get together with many women and to share experiences and talk about the power and energy and utility industries and all that's going on there. But I have to say it was most fun just to have a group of women who could talk about those topics. And that is one of the reasons why I chose for the topic today, making it in what is still a male-dominated industry, because we all know that while we've made tremendous strides, our industry, both in banking and on the utility side, is still very much dominated by men. You'll see from this first slide that I have here that the labor force has changed dramatically over the last 50 years, and particularly for women. I mean, I was surprised to see that, in 1963, it was 38% women, and that has improved by 53% to a total of 58% of the workforce in 2012. So we have a majority of the workers out there being female, being women, but why aren't we moving up faster? Why aren't we in leadership roles? I don't know about you, but I also think this statistic on this slide, when we look at the labor force participation of mothers, that in 1962 it was 54.4%. I was just totally surprised by that. And today it's 70.5%. And we've done a great job of getting more and more educated, as you'll see from the right side of this slide. So we're doing all the right things. So what's stopping us? And when I think about our field of power and utility, we're still lagging a bit. Oh yeah, I forgot I'm in charge of my own slides. I don't get to do that very often. So there, I have a new slide up. Women comprise 23.3% of the workforce in the utilities industry. And having more women on utility boards leads to a better performing business. And this is proven through an E&Y analysis that showed that the global top 20 utilities for gender diversity with a combined average return of equity of 8.5% significantly outperformed the lower 20% with a combined average ROE of 7%. So clearly, if you have gender diversity, you have women on your board, it is not only good for your company and for the community and for your employees, but it's also good for your returns. And I always like to throw a little data in there. This next slide, I think you all will recognize Lynn Good. She's the CEO of Duke Energy. But what I think is really sad is that we have a lot of work to do. Of the top 20 power and utility companies, we only have one female CEO. And you would think, okay, well, maybe we have some female CFOs. Today, in the top 15, 0 CFOs. So we have a lot of work to do here. But there are several things that will have a huge impact on the workforce, the workplace, especially for women. You know, one of these things is the topic of longevity, and Bank of America Merrill Lynch has been thinking about this topic tremendously because we feel it is going to be transformative, and it's going to have implications on business and communities and how we live. Merrill Lynch did some research that shows that baby boomers are changing many preconceived notions about old age, with nearly 3/4 of people over the age of 50 expressing a desire to continue working in retirement. And last month, we sponsored and partnered with the Global Coalition on Aging to convene a roundtable on retirement and economic opportunities generated by our aging population. And what we discussed there was this growing impact that baby boomers are going to have on the nation's economy. Rather than it being a drain on local economies, we found that a large aging workforce has the potential to spur growth. As with the integration of women into the workforce during the 20th century, older employees are really going to have the potential to drive overall economic development. And what our studies showed was that the employment of older people leads to increased employment and higher wages for younger workers. And global companies are really recognizing these opportunities, and they've started to modify strategies to enable their aging employees. So the bottom line here is now is the time to consider the best ways to serve an aging workplace. With a sizable older population, businesses and civic leaders have to foster intergenerational collaboration and identify new older residents that can remain active and engaged in the workforce so that they drive economic growth. And the companies, as well as the communities in which they operate, are going to benefit from creating age-diverse workplaces with tangible, measurable gains in terms of productivity, competitiveness, and worker satisfaction. And as we continue these conversations about retirement in our workplace, it's really up to all of us to start thinking about aging differently than we have in the past. I think we'll all agree that we are living longer. And you can see from the slide here that there really are 3 major contributors to increased longevity. Not only do we have greater public awareness of public health and our environment, we've had significant scientific advancements in medicine and healthcare, and we've cured so many infectious diseases. And then on top of that, we've had improvement in lifestyle, preventative care, diet and exercise, mental health, wellness initiatives, et cetera. I don't know about you, but it's just been a few years where I've had all those wellness surveys to fill out. And, it does make you stop and think about, what am I doing? How am I living? And all of these things are really going to have a significant impact. Lives are extending and birth rates are dropping all over the world, and a new rising proportion of old to young is emerging, and we've never seen this in the world before. Since 1950, global life expectancy as birth has increased 22 years. I mean, think 22 years, from 47 years old to 69. And across developed countries, life expectancy rose dramatically from around 50 to now over 75 years. I thought this was just an astonishing fact that today there are 841 million people aged 60 and over, and that's roughly 12% of the total global population. And by 2050, the over 60 population will reach 2 billion, and that'll be about 21% of the global population. But if you're like me, that just sounds like a bunch of numbers. So if you're 55 today, studies are showing that you have a 1 in 8 chance of living to be 100. If you're 20 years old today, you have a 1 in 4 chance. A baby being born today has a 33% chance, and by 2050, the U.S. will have over 1 million 100-year-olds. I was talking about this to my husband, who was like, are you kidding me? How are any of us going to be ready for this? And I think that is something that we all need to focus on. If you look globally, this is not just in the United States, it's truly a global phenomenon. Most developed nations have fertility rates below the replacement level, and over the past half-century, the world's total fertility rates have plunged from 6 children per female to 2 children per female. Today, Japan is the only country with more than 30% of its population over 60, but by 2050, this will be the case in 64 nations. And in fact, Japan, they're thinking that in the next 5 years' time, they'll sell more adult diapers than baby diapers. Think about that for a minute. And in the developed world, there are already more than people over the age of 60 than under 15, and this will be true globally by 2025. In the U.S., 10,000 people a day turn 65. And this is going to peak with 4.3 million people turning 65 on an annual basis. 4.3 million people per year. That's just staggering to me. So when we think of retiring, it's no longer going to be about assisted living, nursing homes, caregiving, because the baby boomer generation is a major catalyst for this aging and longevity trend. And baby boomers are going to be transformative even as they age. In addition to having all these significant numbers and prolonged lifespan, we really see that baby boomers are challenging previous ideas of what it means to retire. And they're thinking about that with their pocketbooks. Boomers control 80% of the U.S. net worth today. And people over 50 outspend all other demographics across industry sectors, and this is not just health care. And the over 50 market will grow by at least another 1/3 over the next few years, so that by 2032, those over 50 will spend $13.5 trillion with a T, which is the equivalent of half of the U.S. GDP. So they're going to have lots of power, and they're going to have lots of money to spend. And so we all need to think about that. This slide that you see up here, I think this is the most interesting slide. You know, when I was putting this together and thinking about what I want to talk about, I'm like, I hope people don't think this is boring, but I think if you just look at this one slide, it just changes the way you think about the future. The traditional view is that you work, you raise a family, but now that we're going to live 20 to 30 years longer, and that number is growing, how will the view of retirement and life course be transformed? According to our survey data, this chart is a reflection of how boomers are viewing retirement. In fact, one study suggests that if you're a millennial today, a new paradigm is being formed. You may maintain your college education, work, raise a family, and then go back to college for a second degree, then rejoin the workforce and work into your 80s. Think about that. You know, today we get our education, you know, till we're 22 or so, then we start a job, raise a family, and then in our 60s, we retire. And that's when we travel and we do some other things. And then with life expectancy historically, you know, being in the early 70s, that made a lot of sense. But now that we're looking at longer lives, how is this going to change the life course? So you'll still go to school until you're, you know, 22 or so. And we're seeing this already, people are taking a gap year, thinking about what they want to do, spending some time traveling, and then coming back and working for a few years, and then they may say, okay, you know, I really like this, but I need more education to get ahead to attain the things I want to do, so they'll leave and go back to graduate school, you know, in their late 20s. And then they'll work until they're in their early 40s and take a couple of years sabbatical. I missed that whole sabbatical thing. It's really disappointing, but this is going to be great for the people who can do it. So they take a sabbatical, and then they may come back and do something similar to what they were doing before, or they may say, you know, what I really want to do is plan for my second career. So go back to college or get a degree in something else or study something else, so that then in their early 50s, they can start their second career and have another, you know, 15 or 20 years in their second career, then maybe take some more time off to travel and do some things, and then decide, okay, do I want to consult? Do I want to volunteer? What do I want to do? Do I want to get another degree? Really what I want to do with this time of my life, because we're going to be living until we're in our late 80s, 90s, and in some cases 100. So what we're also seeing in all of this is that many colleges are offering seniors free continuing education and undergraduate classes so that they can retool their skills. And some people are just going to want to go back to school just for the pure enjoyment of learning and to maintain their mental sharpness. And while this is all exciting, many have come to terms with what impact this increased longevity is going to have on their personal life and financing an additional 20 years of living. So people are going to be looking at, how am I going to have the money that I need in retirement? And a new phrase has been coined called the silver economy. And a fascinating study has been done on this, contributing to the notion and awareness of how aging and longevity is transforming economies across the world. And a recent Pew survey in the United States shows that older people are the fastest growing group of adopters of social digital technology. So, you know, don't be laughing at your parents because they're learning how to use everything. And I thought it was interesting that in France, those over 55 will be responsible for 2/3 of all increased consumption between now and 2030. Again, boomers are going to be living longer and they have money to spend. Today, boomers spend roughly $230 billion on consumer packaged goods, and that's equal to 55% of the overall sales in the United States. And by 2017, baby boomers in the United States are going to control 70% of disposable income. Something else that I thought was really interesting out of this study was that 23% of new entrepreneurs in between 2011 and 2012 were aged 55 to 64. My husband's 54 years old, and in March he retired and has started his own business. So I know for a fact that this is something that we're going to see more and more of. And, you know, the United States actually did another study that said, let's ask people who are nearing retirement age or traditional retirement age, you know, who wants to completely retire? And only about 20% said they really wanted to retire completely. Lots of people wanted new careers, wanted to set up a new business, and they really want flexibility. They want to be able to continue to work, to continue to be active, but have some flexibility. And this, again, is global. The last time we saw this similar social change was when women really entered the workplace. when women added nearly $3 trillion to the economy and women-owned businesses employing nearly 16% of the workforce. So longevity in the workplace is going to have a huge impact on all workers, but particularly for women. So what does this mean for women? You know, unlike their mothers, almost 70% of boomer women work full or part-time. Most women say they'd like to continue working for additional income, for the challenge of the work, for personal fulfillment, and for social interaction. So employers need to think about about all these as they're thinking about their strategies for their companies. And employers are finding that some new employees starting their career may in fact be beginning their second or their third careers. And a study by the AARP found that almost 50% of boomers see themselves working until the age of 70 or more, and 36% said they will never be able to afford retirement. I think that's kind of sad, but I also think it's kind of great because we all know people who have retired and you see they kind of lost their spark for life. So if we continue to work, we continue to be active, you know, we don't have to just do one career in our lives, but there's many things we can do. It's really exciting for all of us. One of the things that all of us have faced as women is this unconscious bias in the workforce. There was one study that was conducted and published in the American Economic Review where women musicians were auditioned, and when they were auditioned and they were behind the curtain, they were 50% more likely to be picked than if they were out front. Here on the slide you see a picture of Heidi, and there was a study about Heidi. Two professors wrote up a case study about the real-life Heidi that you see here, and described how she became a successful venture capitalist by relying on her outgoing personality and huge professional and personal network. The professors then had a group of students read Heidi's story with her real name attached, and another group read the story with the name changed to Howard. Then the students rated how Howard and Heidi did, and based on their accomplishments, and how appealing they seemed to be as colleagues. And while the students rating them equally in terms of success, they thought Howard was likable while Heidi seemed selfish and not the type of person you'd want to hire or work for. So what does this tell us? That when a man is successful, he's well-liked. When women does well, people like her less. Just a sad state of affairs that we need to be conscious of. In an article in The Atlantic, they discussed how surprised they were to discover the extent to which women suffered from self-doubt. I was in a meeting yesterday with a group of women that I'll tell you a little bit more about, but it's called The Power of 10. And this is something we were talking about, how when women compare themselves to men, we don't consider ourselves to be ready for promotions. We predict we'll do worse on the test, and we typically underestimate our abilities. I don't know about you, but every time I start a new job, I think I can't do this. I made a huge mistake. Am I really qualified for this? We've got to stop doing this because this lack of confidence can be devastating. Success, it turns out, correlates just as closely with confidence as it does with competence. So it's no wonder that women, despite all of our progress, are still woefully underrepresented at the higher levels, like what we saw on that slide with Lynn Good. All of this is bad news. The good news is that with work and confidence, we can go places. And if we work hard on it, we can acquire confidence, which means that the confidence gap can be closed. Linda Babcock, she's a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and she wrote, "Women Don't Ask," found that in a study of business school students that men initiate salary discussions 4 times as often as women do. And that women, when they do negotiate, they ask for 30% less money than men do. So we're our own worst enemies. And Hewlett-Packard discovered something several years ago when trying to figure out how to get more women into top management positions. They looked at their personnel records and found that women working at HP applied for a promotion only when they believed that they met 100% of the qualifications listed for the job. The men were just happy to apply when they thought they could meet 60% of the job requirements. why are we doing this to ourselves? Underqualified and underprepared men don't think twice about leaning in. Overqualified and overprepared women still hold back. And we as women only feel confident when we're perfect or almost perfect. So we are sabotaging ourselves. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Bank of America to work together as women. Because at our firm, we're committed to investing in and empowering women inside and outside of our organization. And almost 60% of Bank of America employees are women. And one thing I know, and I think other women at Bank of America know, is that you don't build a successful career alone. So we invite all of our female employees to participate in employee networks or join a group dedicated to the interests of women in specific business lines. So one of those groups is Lead for Women, and that's a bank-sponsored employee network group that's dedicated to promoting professional women's development. It offers information, education, advocacy, and networking so that women can share best practices and cultivate connections. And I like to say cultivate connections more than networking, because I think networking is overused. But we do need to cultivate connections. We do need to cultivate relationships. There are three lines of business women's groups at Bank of America. One is Women in Technology and Operations. Another is the Women's Exchange, which is for women in what we call GWIM, or wealth management. And then the third one is GBAM, the Women's Leadership Council, and that's for women in global banking and markets. And there's similarities and there's synergies amongst all these groups, but the differences are in the activities that we advocate for women. Within the group WIT&O, we partner internally with the Diversity Inclusion Group around GT&O, and we hold a forum on that. We also include global human resources, leadership development, and staffing, and we are involved with the National Center for Women in Information Technology. And this has all helped us to reach our goals. And another thing we're doing there is recognizing and hiring high school girls as part of an early program to help them see what is available to them out in the real world. And we support recruiting efforts at events. There's the Grace Hopper celebration that really develops technology and operations-specific learning for young girls. And then on a more personal level, I've been involved in several other things. There is, mentoring. We've all said, okay, we want to mentor other women. We want to mentor other people. And at Bank of America, we have lots of opportunities to do that, both formally and informally. I have a couple of formal mentees that I get through programs at Bank of America. But then there are other women that I just meet, and I think, a lot of people help to me. I want to help these women too. So what can we do to help them? So I think the mentoring is very important. And then another thing that we do here that I think you might all find interesting is a group that we call iGen. And so I have a mentor who is, I think she's 26 years old, and I am her mentee, and it's a reverse mentoring program. So that if I'm looking at something and I have no idea what they're talking about, I remember I think I called her about, a few years ago about, okay, talk to me about tweeting. What is that? Or, hey, I know that Facebook isn't the in thing now. What are younger folks doing? So she can answer all those kind of questions for me. And I think we both have learned a lot from each other. So it's stepping outside the box. It's looking at things differently. And then one of the most important things I think that we do at Bank of America is we have an unconscious bias program that we are sure that all of our employees go through. And I was giving a talk about this last year to a large group of people, and I had been talking to different people to try to get ideas and examples. And I had actually a guy who's on the team in South Carolina called me up and he said, I've got a great example for you. But I got on an airplane the other day. It was one of those small planes. They had one what did he call her? He said they had one waitress. I was like, flight attendant. And he goes, oh, yeah. So they had one stewardess. I was like, flight attendant. And he said, and so she was on, she was talking, and went through everything, and then in a minute I heard another woman come on and talk, and I'm looking, and I'm like, I don't see another stewardess on here. I'm like, it's a flight attendant. And he says, I don't see her, we take off, and then you hear the voice from the captain come on, saying we'd achieved, 30,000 feet. He goes, the other woman was the pilot. So it's just typical for so many of us that we think that there's certain jobs that are just done by men. And we as women have to step out and not have those unconscious biases. And we have them, but what can we do to really stop and think, do I have an unconscious bias around this? Because as soon as you recognize it, then you're more likely not to do it. And I think this is my last slide. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about Bank of America and diversity and inclusion, because I am so proud of our company and what we've done. When we opened for business in 1784, 15 of the original shareholders were women. So we have a real history of diversity. In 1923, we opened a women's banking department with women doing business for women. How innovative was that in 1923? And in 1997, we were the first major U.S. bank to extend family benefit plans to same-sex domestic partners. And since 2012, we've collected 2.5 million expressions of gratitude for service members and veterans through our Express Your Thanks campaign. And we generated $2.5 million in donations to organizations that serve these veterans. And during 2014, we spent more than $2.5 billion with diverse businesses to help them expand and to thrive. Our inclusion demonstrates who we are today. Our global leadership team is 30% female. Our C-suite has females. And 46% of our board members are women, or they're ethnically diverse. We partner with more than 40 organizations globally to promote diversity and inclusion in the communities we serve. I have been a member of our Global Diversity and Inclusion Council, and that is chaired by our CEO, Brian Monahan, and it ensures that our leaders are driving diversity and inclusion process. Every time I look to hire someone, one of the first things I think about, and then one of the first things we talk about is, how diverse is your slate of candidates? We don't just give this lip service, we really, really do it. And we have all these employee groups, I think you saw from the previous slide, including the Asian Leadership Network, the Black Professionals Group, the Disability Advocacy Network, the LGBT Pride, Multicultural Leadership Network, and Parents and Caregivers Network. And I just know from my experience, and when I look at the team here in the Carolinas that I have the great privilege of leading, every one of those employees is a member of one of these networks, and it does truly make a difference. So I would encourage all of you to think about, what are you doing in your career? What do you want to be doing? Are you reaching out a hand and helping other women? Are you thinking about diversity and inclusion? Those things will make us better than ever. And I think that we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be here with everybody today. I'll have to be honest and tell you, this is the first time I've ever done a webinar, and I usually get really animated when I'm talking, and so I hope some of that came through and it wasn't too boring. But I think we have some time if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Linda. That was a very informative presentation, and the statistics were very illuminating. We do have a couple
it wasn't too boring. I hope it didn't bore everybody.
No, I found it really quite informative. We've received a couple of questions that came in the queue. The first one asks, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how it evolved into specialization in power and utilities?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa, for bringing that question forward. You know, I was raised in a small town in South Carolina, and I went to the University of South Carolina undergraduate, and I started out in engineering, and I'm sitting in the classroom looking around going, okay, well, there's one other female in here. I try to talk to people around me. I'm like, okay, I'm really not fitting in. Maybe this is not the right thing for me. And that was the first time I think I had ever been in a situation where I'm like, this is all men, and who am I going to talk to? Well, I switched to business, and it was probably a really good thing for me, although it would have been nice to have an engineering background with what I've done in my career. But so I went to the University of South Carolina. I always wanted to move to Atlanta. So after undergraduate school, I moved to Atlanta and started with the Federal Reserve Bank in supervision regulation for bank holding companies, which was a great starting point. And I knew I wouldn't stay there for the long haul, but it was just a great place to get some good experience. And so from there, I had the great pleasure of going to work for an international bank. And you heard Lisa say that I have a degree in finance and a degree in marketing, and I also have a degree in international studies. So the whole international piece just really was interesting to me. So this was in the mid to late 80s, and I went to work for Fuji Bank, Japanese bank, based out of Tokyo, opening an office in Atlanta, and they had bought what we call loan participations in the market, and they'd never really done a whole lot of direct business, so they wanted somebody who could come in and establish relationships. And so at a very young age, I had the opportunity to do more deals than most people get to in their whole career. But I was immediately drawn to some of the utility businesses. I was covering the Southeast. So, you had the really big Southern Company, Progress Energy at that point. You had Duke Energy. And so I banked all of them from a very early age. But I will have to tell you that one of the funny things was that by this point was, the early 90s, and we had a change in leadership at Fuji Bank. And the new general manager came in and he said, Renda-san, I do not think men should report to women. And I said, well, you don't care about the $4 billion portfolio I've built for you in the last 3 or 4 years or 5 years. And he said, I don't think men should report to women. Well, that was a big clue for me. Time to move on. Let's do something different. So I went to work for Credit Bank, which is a Belgian bank. And, again, I covered the Southeast, but I also covered Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, really got into oil and gas. And so that coupled with my power and energy experience, I finally the light bulb went off for me. I was like, okay, I see how these things fit together. I see how the various sectors of energy play together. And it was fascinating for me. I ended up running the office for Credit Bank in Atlanta, but said, I'm too much of a deal junkie. It's too early in my career to do Fed reports and personnel audits and all those kind of things. I really want to do deals. So the Legacy Bank of America, the West Coast B of A, was starting a group in Atlanta, a de novo office, really starting from nothing, and no bricks and mortar, no branches, just looking to do loans. And so I left Credit Bank and I went to Bank of America, and there were 90 of us with Bank of America and 9,000 with Nations Bank. And several years later, Nations Bank came and acquired Bank of America, and I was one of the lucky ones who had a new role with the new bank. About the same time, my father was terminally ill and had to go to MD Anderson in Houston to get treatment. And I made a very personal decision to leave Bank of America, and I went and told folks at the bank, it's a personal decision. I know I'm making, I'm not making this decision, for my career. I'm making it for me personally because I want to be able to be in Houston whenever I need to. And I joined SunTrust because they were starting an energy group, and they wanted me to come over and head up the power and utility sector. And they said that I could be in Houston anytime I needed to because, again, the way we looked at it was throughout the oil and gas, power and utility, you should have clients in each sector so you really understand how it all fits together. So I went to work for SunTrust, formed a very successful practice there. It was great fun to build something from nothing. I covered the country, and after my daddy died, people from Bank of America would call me about every 6 months and say, you ready to come back? You ready to come back? Which always makes you feel good, doesn't it? Doesn't that make you feel good when people want you to come back? And so I said, well, I'm really having fun. I'm loving what I'm doing. But one day, I got a call and they said, you know, we just have a great opportunity for you. We really want you to come back. And I said, well, I'm launching a deal. Let me call you when I get done. So the next morning I wake up and I turn on the television and I see that some guys tried to blow up the plane by lighting his shoes on fire. And I said, okay, the good Lord is trying to tell me to get off all these airplanes. So I called Bank of America, came back, was back about 2 weeks. I was just going to be a generalist in the Atlanta office, which meant I wasn't going to have any industry specialty. And the head of our Southeast region called me and said, hey, I think maybe we're not using your talents correctly. And she was a woman. She said, well, I don't think we're using you well. So come talk to me. So she championed me to start a middle market power and utility group for Bank of America. We'd always had everything on the large corporate side. So this was a time when we could come and focus on companies between $50 million and $2 billion, maybe even a little larger than that, but companies that we're not going to be in the capital markets every day or every month. They needed more patient money. They really wanted longer and stronger relationships. And I thought that just sounded perfect. So we started this Power and Energy Group. And 6 years later, I was given the opportunity to come back to the Carolinas where I'm from and to head up the commercial bank for North Carolina and South Carolina. And I was lucky enough to get to bring the power and utility practice to the Carolinas. And so we run that out of North Carolina now. And I know that sounds like a really, really long-winded answer to your question, but that's kind of how it all came about. So I've done a lot of different things in my career, but one thing has been that I have always enjoyed startups, building something from scratch, coming in and fixing things. And then I've had a lot of people reach out their hand to help me, both men and women. I've heard a lot of stories where people say, you know, that women won't help other women. I've never found that to be true. And I think we all need to look inside ourselves and say, hey, somebody helped me. Let me help some other folks.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. I have another question that came in that is directed towards your community and civic activism. It asks, how did you get involved, and then how has this involvement or participation benefited your career?
Oh, thanks. That's a great, fun question. You know, first I think when you're looking to get involved in the community, think about something that you're passionate about. So I thought about, okay, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about women and girls. And so I became involved with the Atlanta Women's Foundation, which is really a catalyst for women and girls, trying to break generational occurrences and help women and girls to stand on their own 2 feet and be totally self-sufficient. And so I got involved in that very early on, and ultimately became the treasurer of the organization and on the board. And that, to me, it was just all about seeing these young girls and seeing what they've had to fight to get ahead, and not having people that they really could look up to and say, okay, they made it. And it was just, and it has a lot of mentoring, but it also has to do with different groups in the community that reach out and help women and girls. So I was very, very passionate about that, and so that was something I got involved in. And then I got very involved in Leadership Georgia because I'm also passionate about leadership, because to me it's not managing people, it's about really building relationships with people. And I've always heard, if you think you're a leader, turn around and see if anybody's following you. And so I was concerned about some of the younger folks that I knew and about their leadership characteristics, and so became very involved in Leadership Georgia, went through the program, chaired we have 5 programs a year, and so chaired one of the programs, actually did it on natural resources, brought in the whole utility part, help people understand, you know, Joe Blow off the street doesn't really understand when we say utilities what that is, and when we say alternative energy, what does that mean, and when we say base load, what does that mean. And so was able to really educate some people on that. And then I served on the board for 6 years, which was really a lot of fun, getting to know a lot of people, because anybody from 25 to 50 years old can be in the class. And to see all of those different generations work together and to bring different ideas and to open yourself up different ideas. So that's been great. Yeah, I also have been involved in organizations along the way that have to do with our industry, the EEI, the American Gas Association, Generation Transmission. All those things help you in your career. But I think the thing that I have gotten the most benefit from is mentoring. I think, Lisa, when you talked about my background, you talked about this Georgia State University mentoring program, and we started that for female MBA students, and this was back in the mid-90s. And to really put a professional woman as a mentor with a MBA student, a female, and I did that for about 6 years and had 3 international students during that time and learned so much from them and just respected all that they have done to get to where they are and how hard it is for them to leave their country and come to the United States to study. But they have such a dream and they have such ambition. I got more out of that than I ever could have given. And when I moved to Charlotte, I was talking to some folks over at Wake Forest University, and they had never done a mentoring program. And so we actually started a mentoring program, and it's been phenomenal. I've actually had 2 mentees over there, and both of them are now working for Bank of America. So it's been good for me from a professional standpoint as well. But, just to have the chance to meet and get to know some of these young people just coming out of graduate school and talking to them about what they want to do and what excites them and just how brilliant these people are. So it's been a lot of fun. I talked about Lead for Women. I'm an executive sponsor there. It's a great way to connect with other women and, again, some younger women who are, new in their career, to help them to see what's possible and to help them connect with other people. I talked a little bit about our Power of 10 group, and I wanted to tell you all what that is. We have a female executive very high up in the organization who several years ago said, we really need to do something to help each other. And, the guys always have, their groups, they go do all these things together. And I don't know about y'all, but in the Southeast, we still have the good old boys network. So what can we do as women? And so she came up with this program called the Power of 10. And she invited 10 women to come and be part of her Power of 10. And then asked each one of those women to establish their own Power of 10 group. So I'm fortunate enough to have a Power of 10 group. I actually have, I think, 15 people in my Power of 10 right now. We're about to spin off and have some people start other groups. But it's about women supporting women. And we've talked about that a lot today. But coming together in a very safe place with women who are, 22 years old in their first job, to people like me that have been doing this a really long time. And we talk about, we read books and we talk about that. We read articles, we talk about that. Yesterday we had our meeting and we were going through an article about, 10 points for brilliant women and 10 things that women should never say. And as part of that, we got off on this whole thing of a 360, how do you look at doing a 360 review and how that has impacted all different people's lives. So it's just a great way for women to get together and talk about things that they're interested in, have a safe place to bounce ideas off. And it's not just about a life-work balance. I told some guys, we don't even talk about shoes. I mean, we could, but we don't. And it's just been such a growth vehicle for me personally, and I hope also for all the members in the Power of 10 group. Today, I am involved a lot with economic development because I think it's so important for our communities and for our businesses. And economic development is big, big, big business. And so I am the chair of the board for the Charlotte Regional Partnership, which is economic development for the 16 counties, including Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte, to help bring businesses to the area. And I'm also on the executive committee and the board for the chamber. And so that takes up a lot of time, but I think it's important for all of us. And I'm just glad to see women involved in this. And when I didn't know when they asked me to be the chair of the Charlotte Regional Partnership that I was the first woman to ever be. But, you know, we are. We're still breaking glass ceilings. And sometimes we don't even know we're doing it, and we find out, hey, that's pretty a big deal. But we should have done this 20 years ago. Again, I'm long-winded. I'm sorry, Lisa.
Oh, that's quite all right. We're thoroughly enjoying you and having a great time with this. But you did have another question that came in from Sandra in response to your Power of 10 group. She wants to know, is this only within Bank of America, or do you have women from outside the company involved too?
You know, that's a great question. Right now, we only do it within our organization, but we have expanded it. And sometimes when I have, in the Power 10 group that I put together, I want it to be very geographically and age diverse and to have people from all over the country. But we try to get together. We have a women's conference in New York once a year that we all go to, and we try to all get together there. And we've been up there and we've invited women from the outside to come and have dinner with us and talk about what we're doing. And here in Charlotte, we've invited some other women to participate when we're doing a community event, or when we're going out to dinner or going to have a drink or whatever. And so we opened it up that way. But when we have our circle meetings, we do it just within the organization. So I think you can do it either way.
Very good. Well, I have one more question that came in, and they ask, Deb says, what challenges have you faced and how have you handled them?
Challenges in my career. I told you all that I had worked for Fuji Bank, and I was there probably first 2 weeks, and this was, you know, in the mid to late 80s. And I am sitting at my desk. It's an open office environment, which means that all of the desks are just out in an open space. And the general manager comes over to my desk and he says, Brenda, the kitchen is dirty. And I said, oh my gosh, to myself, I have made the worst career decision of my life. And I thought for a minute, and I looked up at him and I said, I'm a little sorry about that, but I think that you hired somebody else to help you with that, and I don't really think that's how you want me to spend my time. Well, he got all mad. His face turned red. He stomped off. He didn't speak to me for several weeks. But after that, he always gave me opportunities. You know, again, being a very young person to head up a group, going out and then doing direct calling efforts. But he gave me that opportunity, and I think it really was a test. But, you know, sometimes you get those tests and you're not sure at the time that it is a test. But that was a test, and I'm glad I handled it the way I did, but it wasn't fun at the time. And then you know, you all are in the utility world, and so, you know, when I say the word Enron, if you're like me, it just makes your stomach hurt. When I had a chance many times in my career to be the relationship person for Enron, and I remember when I joined the group at SunTrust, the head of the group asked me, he said, I really want you to do Enron. And I said, you know, John, I don't think I'm smart enough, because I just do not understand what they're doing. And when I go and talk to them and I ask them a question, they make me feel stupid for asking that question. And I just don't feel like I'm the right person to handle it. You know, it takes a lot of courage to say that you don't understand something. It takes a lot of courage to say I'm not smart enough, and we probably should never say we're not smart enough, but that's what I said at the time. I'm not smart enough. But maybe I was smart enough, because if I had taken that on, I think my career would have ended very differently. And I think we all need to have more courage to say something doesn't make sense, something doesn't feel right. And as we went through unwinding portfolios with a lot of the marketing companies, it was very interesting. You know, I remember we had one company that was doing a spinoff of their marketing entities, and as one of their bankers, I voted against it, and we had crossed board ties. And I think our vice chairman called me and said, hey, what the heck are you doing voting against this? And I said, you know, for these reasons, I just really don't think it's the right thing. You know, these are my concerns, and if you know, the bank wants to go forward with this, then I think somebody else probably needs to handle this relationship. You got to stick by your guns. You got to keep your integrity, because that's really all you have at the end of the day. Does that help?
Very much so, giving yourself permission to say yes and no, and you know, upholding your convictions. That's a huge step for women as well. But Linda, we're nearing the top of the hour, so I want to be respectful of your time and conclude pretty promptly. Are there any final comments that you would like to make to encourage women to help them with their journey?
Well, thank you for that opportunity, and I will say, just be true to yourself and be passionate in everything that you do. We spend more time working than we do anything else, and so make the most out of every day that you have. And again, I just appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody today. Thanks again to AAC Utility Partners for sponsoring and for inviting me to be part of this. It's been great fun for me, and I hope I didn't bore everybody to tears.
Oh, no, Linda, this has been wonderful, and we're glad that you were here. I also want to let the attendees know that if after the webinar you have additional questions that arise, or you think of other additional points that you'd like to get clarification from Linda on, please email our office, email Amber Weems, and she will forward them to Linda, and we'll take those and have those ready for you post-webinar for follow-up. At this time, Linda, I just want to say thank you, and thank you again to AAC Utility Partners, and for all of our attendees for joining us today. And this will conclude our webinar.
Thank you very much.